Story 1. Story 1, The Violinist. It began, as so many ill-fated things do, with a simple Craigslist ad. I'd been searching for a new violin, something with a bit more depth than my student model, and there it was, a meticulously maintained antique, listed for a price that seemed almost too good to be true. The accompanying photo showed a gleaming instrument, its wood a rich, dark honey color. The seller, identified only as M, requested inquiries via email only. My apartment, a cramped studio in the pre-war walk-up on Bleecker, felt smaller than usual that evening as I typed out my message. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of old brick and stale cigarette smoke from the neighbor downstairs. I hit send and almost immediately received a terse reply, cash only. Meet tomorrow. 10 p.m. Corner of Bleecker and Thompson. 10 p.m.? It was an odd time, but the violin called to me. The following night, a damp chill permeated the air. The streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows, and the usual city hum seemed muted, replaced by a low, pervasive thrum that I couldn't quite place. Bleecker Street, typically bustling, was eerily deserted. As the clock ticked towards 10, a figure emerged from the shadows across the street. Tall and thin, draped in a long black coat, the person moved with an unsettling grace. M? I called out, my voice a nervous tremor in the quiet. The figure nodded, the face obscured by the darkness and a wide-brimmed hat. A long, slender hand, almost skeletal in appearance, extended from beneath the coat, holding a violin case. It was the same deep honey color as the picture. The money of the voice, when it came, was low and raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I handed over the cash, my hand trembling. M didn't count it, just tucked it into the coat pocket and offered me the case. The clasp felt cold, almost icy, against my fingers. I fumbled with it, finally managing to open it. Inside, the violin lay nestled in burgundy velvet, more beautiful in person than in the photo. Thank you, I managed to stammer, already feeling a sense of unease creeping up my spine. M simply nodded again and turned to melt back into the shadows. I watched, a strange disquiet churning in my stomach, until the figure disappeared completely. Back in my apartment, I carefully lifted the violin from its case. The wood felt oddly warm against my skin. As I rosined the bow, I noticed a small, almost imperceptible inscription etched into the neck, lacrimae. I didn't recognize the word, but it felt ominous. The first few notes I played were exquisite. Rich, resonant, unlike anything I'd ever heard. But as I played, the melody began to twist, becoming something melancholic, almost mournful. The air in my apartment grew colder, the scent of stale smoke replaced by something metallic, like blood. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to writhe. I stopped playing, my heart pounding against my ribs. Silence descended, thick and heavy. I tried to rationalize it, attributing it to the late hour, the city noises, my overactive imagination. But a deep, primal fear had taken root in my gut. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every rustle from the street below, sent shivers down my spine. The violin lay in its case on my desk, and I could have sworn I heard faint, mournful notes emanating from it, like a whispered lament. The next few days were a blur of unease and growing paranoia. I couldn't bring myself to touch the violin again. The inscription, lacrimae, haunted me. I looked it up, discovering it was Latin for tears. Then came the nightmares. Vivid, disturbing dreams filled with shadowy figures, mournful music, and the constant, metallic scent of blood. I woke up each morning more exhausted than the last, the feeling of being watched clinging to me like a second skin. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, the phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. Silence. Then, a low, raspy whisper, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, "Do you like the violin?" I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed the violin case and rushed out of my apartment, down the dimly lit stairs, and out onto the street. I ran, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape the suffocating fear. Finally, I reached Washington Square Park and, in a fit of desperation, threw the violin case into a trash can. I haven't seen or heard from M since. But the nightmares continue. The mournful music still echoes in my mind. And sometimes, when I walk past a street musician playing a violin, I swear I can smell that faint, metallic scent of blood. The feeling of being watched, it never truly goes away. And I keep wondering, what if someone finds that violin? What will they hear? What will they see? Story 2. Story 2, The Whispering Dresser. The musty scent of old wood and forgotten dreams clung to the air inside the antique store. Sunlight, fractured by the dusty panes of the storefront window, illuminated motes dancing in the gloom. I ran a hand over the smooth, dark wood of a Victorian dresser, its ornate carvings whispering stories of a time long past. I'd been searching for weeks, scouring Craigslist for a unique piece to complete my guest bedroom. This dresser, listed simply as an antique dresser, best offer, felt right. Beautiful piece, isn't she? The store owner, a wizened woman with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets, materialized beside me. She's been waiting for a new home. A shiver danced down my spine, unrelated to the chill of the store. How much are you asking? We settled on a price that felt suspiciously low, and I arranged for delivery the next day. As I drove home, a strange sense of anticipation, edged with unease, settled in my stomach. The dresser arrived promptly the next afternoon, two burly men grunting as they wrestled it into the guest bedroom. As soon as they left, the air in the room felt different. Heavier. I dismissed it as my imagination. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A low, rhythmic tapping, almost like a heartbeat, seemed to emanate from the dresser. I told myself it was the old house settling, the pipes groaning. But the tapping continued, growing more insistent, intermingled with whispers too faint to decipher. I spent the next few days in a growing state of anxiety. Sleep became a luxury. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent jolts of fear through me. The whispers from the dresser intensified, swirling around me like phantom breaths. I started seeing things in the periphery of my vision, fleeting shadows, dark shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. One evening, driven to the edge of sanity, I decided to empty the dresser, convinced I'd find some logical explanation for the sounds. Each drawer slid open with a groan, revealing nothing but the faint scent of lavender and dust. But the last drawer, the smallest one at the bottom, was stuck fast. I pulled harder, my knuckles whitening. With a sudden, sharp crack, the drawer slid open, revealing not clothes or trinkets, but a small, tarnished silver locket. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. Inside, nestled against faded velvet, was a miniature portrait of a young woman with hauntingly familiar eyes. The eyes I'd seen in fleeting glimpses in the shadows. As I stared at the portrait, the whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, chilling voice that seemed to echo inside my skull. Mine, it hissed. The locket grew cold in my hand, burning like ice. I dropped the locket as if it were scalding, scrambling back from the dresser. The room plunged into an oppressive darkness, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls like grotesque marionettes. The whispers became a chorus, swirling around me, closing in. I fled the room, slamming the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the living room couch, every nerve ending screaming, the whispers still echoing in my mind. The next morning, I cautiously approached the guest bedroom door. The whispers were gone, replaced by an unnerving silence. I slowly opened the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was bathed in sunlight, the dresser standing innocently against the wall. I tentatively approached the dresser, my hand hovering over the bottom drawer. It slid open smoothly, revealing nothing but emptiness. The locket was gone. I searched the room, every nook and cranny, but found nothing. The locket, the portrait, the whispers, all vanished as if they had never existed. But the feeling remained. The feeling of being watched. The feeling of something waiting. I haven't slept in the guest bedroom since. I avoid looking at the dresser. I've even considered selling it, but the thought of someone else experiencing whatever this is fills me with a chilling dread. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think I hear the faintest of whispers coming from the guest bedroom. And I swear, in the reflection of the darkened window, I see the fleeting glimpse of a young woman with hauntingly familiar eyes, watching me. Story 3. Story 3, The Obsidian Mirror. It started with a mirror. An antique, ornate thing listed on Craigslist for a ridiculously low price. I'd been looking for something to fill the awkward blank space above my fireplace mantel, and the ad's grainy photo showed a piece that seemed perfect. The seller, identified only as EM, provided a single, curt reply to my inquiry: available. Cash only. Pick up tonight. No returns. The address led me to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that seemed to absorb the twilight, growing darker and more ominous as the sun sank lower. A single, bare bulb illuminated the porch, casting stark shadows that writhed like restless insects. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. A tall, gaunt woman with eyes that seemed to swallow the dim light opened the door. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, and her voice rasped like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "You're here for the mirror?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "Yes," I managed, feeling a prickle of unease. "Is it still available?" She nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, and gestured into the house. The interior was even more unsettling than the exterior. Thick dust coated every surface, and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something indefinable that made my stomach churn. The only light came from a flickering candle in the hallway, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The mirror leaned against a far wall, draped in a heavy, black cloth. Even covered, it seemed to radiate a strange energy, a palpable hum that vibrated in my bones. "Be careful with it," the woman rasped. "It reflects more than just light." I dismissed her words as eccentric ramblings, the kind you'd expect from someone living in such a place. I paid the paltry sum she asked, my hand brushing hers, and felt a jolt of icy coldness that shot up my arm. I wrapped the mirror in the cloth and hurried out, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the house. Back in my apartment, the mirror seemed less menacing. I placed it above the mantel, the dark wood complementing the obsidian frame. As I pulled away the cloth, the mirror's surface rippled, like disturbed water, before settling into a perfect, glassy stillness. That night, I started having the dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams of vast, alien landscapes bathed in sickly green light, where cyclopean structures pierced a swirling, chaotic sky. I dreamt of whispers in a language I couldn't understand, yet somehow knew, and of shapes that shifted and writhed just beyond the periphery of my vision. The dreams grew more intense each night, bleeding into my waking hours. I started seeing things in the mirror's reflection that weren't there, fleeting glimpses of impossible geometries, distorted faces leering from the darkness. The air around the mirror felt colder, the metallic scent from the woman's house faintly present. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away as stress, but the feeling of being watched, of being studied, intensified. The whispers from my dreams began to echo in the silence of my apartment, faint and sibilant, just at the edge of hearing. One night, I woke to find myself standing in front of the mirror. I didn't remember getting out of bed. The mirror's surface was no longer reflective. Instead, it swirled with a nebula of colors I couldn't name, colors that seemed to exist outside the spectrum of human vision. The whispers were louder now, coalescing into a single, resonating voice that seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. It spoke my name. I recoiled, stumbling back, my heart pounding against my ribs. The mirror's surface began to bulge outwards, the colors intensifying, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. I could feel a pull, a sickeningly sweet invitation to reach out, to touch the swirling vortex, to step through into the unknown. Terror lent me strength. I turned and fled, not daring to look back. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, the whispers echoing in my ears, the impossible colors burned into my retinas. At dawn, I crept back into the living room. The mirror was gone. The wall above the mantel was bare, the only evidence of its presence a faint, lingering scent of damp earth and something metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. The whispers were gone, replaced by an oppressive silence, a silence that felt heavy with anticipation. I haven't seen the mirror since. But the dreams continue. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when I'm alone in my apartment, I can feel the pull again, the faint, seductive whisper of my name, a promise and a threat from something vast and unknowable, waiting just beyond the veil of reality. Waiting for me to return. Story 4. Story 4, The Whispering Dresser. It started with a Craigslist ad. I needed a dresser. Mine, a rickety hand-me-down, had finally succumbed to years of abuse. Scrolling through endless listings of particle board monstrosities, I stumbled upon it, a solid oak antique, ornate carvings, ridiculously cheap. The accompanying photo was blurry, taken in a dimly lit room, but the dresser's dark silhouette exuded an undeniable charm. Must go ASAP, the ad read. Moving. Pick up only. I emailed the seller, a woman named Eleanor. Her replies were short, cryptic. Pick up tomorrow, 8 p.m. Cash only. The address she provided was in a part of town I'd never been to, a labyrinth of narrow streets lined with Victorian houses, their peeling paint like decaying skin. The following evening, a thick fog had rolled in, clinging to the street lamps like spectral shrouds. Eleanor's house was a hulking three-story affair, shrouded in shadow. A single, bare bulb flickered on the porch. A tall, gaunt woman with hollow eyes opened the door. "Eleanor?" I asked. She nodded silently, her gaze unsettlingly intense. She led me through a dark, musty hallway, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The dresser stood in a sparsely furnished room, even more imposing in person. The carvings were intricate, depicting scenes of writhing figures and grotesque faces that seemed to shift in the flickering lamplight. I tried to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping up my spine. "It's beautiful," I managed, my voice sounding thin in the oppressive silence. Eleanor just stared at me. $500, she rasped. I paid, eager to leave. Two bulky men, who seemed to materialize from the shadows, helped me load the dresser onto my truck. They didn't speak, their faces obscured by the dim light. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Eleanor stood on the porch, her silhouette a dark omen against the faint glow of the porch light. She didn't move, just watched me disappear into the fog. Back at my apartment, the dresser looked out of place, its dark wood clashing with my bright decor. I started unpacking, placing folded clothes into the drawers. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper, coming from inside the dresser. I froze, heart pounding. Silence. I dismissed it as the house settling, the wind, anything but what it sounded like. I continued unpacking, but the whispering returned, louder this time, a sibilant murmur that seemed to slither around the edges of my hearing. I couldn't decipher the words, but they sounded mournful, pleading. The whispering continued every night, growing louder, more insistent. I started losing sleep, plagued by vivid nightmares of writhing figures and whispering voices. The sweet, fruity smell that had permeated Eleanor's house began to fill my apartment, growing stronger with each passing day. My friends noticed the change in me. "You look awful," they'd say. "Are you getting enough sleep?" I'd brush it off, attributing it to stress, but inside, a cold dread was taking root. One night, I awoke to the whispering directly in my ear. I sat up, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was bathed in an unnatural light, emanating from the dresser. I cautiously approached it, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle of the top drawer. As my fingers brushed against the cool wood, the whispering intensified, transforming into a cacophony of voices, screaming, pleading, begging me to open the drawer. A wave of nausea washed over me. I yanked my hand back, stumbling backward, away from the dresser, away from the voices that clawed at my sanity. I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. I grabbed my essentials, my phone, my wallet, leaving everything else behind. As I fled, I could still hear the whispering, echoing from the dresser, growing fainter as I distanced myself, but never truly disappearing. I haven't gone back. I'm staying with a friend, sleeping on their couch, trying to pretend it never happened. But the whispering follows me. I hear it in the rustling of leaves, the hum of the refrigerator, the silence of the night. I see the grotesque faces in the shadows, their eyes following me, their mouths silently forming words I can't understand but feel deep in my bones. I tried to find Eleanor's Craigslist ad again, but it's gone. The house, when I drove past, seemed abandoned, windows boarded up, swallowed by shadows. I don't know what was in that dresser, what those whispers meant. But I know this, it followed me home, and I fear it will never truly let me go. I can still hear it, even now, a soft susurrus just at the edge of my hearing. And I know, with chilling certainty, that it's getting closer.